feedback is information, and we can kind of simplify it down to that notion. It's information. It's information about performance, or it's information about outcome. And we're interested, I guess, in the source of that information. Where does that information actually come from? What is the source of it? And we'll look at that first. And the other thing we want to look at is kind of like, it's sort of like the timing of it. When does that information arrive? Is it during the performance so we can adjust it, or is it kind of after the performance and we can't really do too much about it? And I'm going to sort of it's also the type. It's the timing and the type of information. So I've got these images in here, and hopefully they're going to be useful to us. We're going to make reference to them quite frequently in this session. But let me just drag you down straight away, and we're going to immediately start looking at the notion of intrinsic feedback. Intrinsic feedback, okay? Intrinsic feedback. So we've got our term, that's fine, but now we need to be able to describe this thing and to understand it so we can explain how we can utilize it. The first thing we need to be able to do is we need to understand that this is from the performer. This is information from the performer. So you're performing and you've got information coming back to you. So let's think straight away about our surf performance here. This performer, she's on this board and she's continuously receiving information about whether she is in balance or not in balance. That is a form of intrinsic feedback. Now, this performance here is probably a little bit different. It happens so sort of quick and rapidly while she's in the air that maybe she doesn't receive that feedback at that particular time. She might when she lands back on the beam or not, but that of course is going to come from that's going to come at that point. But this intrinsic feedback is from the performer. We also like to describe it as the feeling of the skill. The feeling of the skill. And because it's the feeling of the skill, we can describe it as a kinesthetic experience. You've actually got an internal sense of how does this feel? Does it feel correct? Do I feel balanced? Do I feel like I'm going to fall over? Do I feel like I've made good contact? This kind of question is obviously going to be useful. So examples would be things like balance. We've got an example of a surfer. He could be a skier, for example, or a gymnast performing a handstand. Am I in balance would be a great example of that. Let's look at a different one. Let's look at extrinsic feedback. Extrinsic feedback. So, of course, you already know that this is not going to be from an internal source. So first things first, we're going to say from outside source. From outside source. From an outside source. Okay, so what kind of things is that going to be? It could be something like some coaching points. Our coach delivers some information to us and we act upon that information. So let's say here, I don't know, we've got this performer here. Maybe this performer here has been shouted from the coach, turn your left shoulder inwards, for example. Okay, that would be an example of extrinsic feedback that the performer could use to adjust and improve their performance. Or indeed, it could come after the performance as well, of course. The other thing is it could be based on teammate feedback. Teammate feedback. Okay, so maybe we've got, let's go back to our scrummaging example perhaps. Maybe we've got here that this number 8 is in control of the rhythm of the scrum, and he's calling at regular kind of intervals, push, push, push. So these are just examples, right? I mean, I don't play rugby. I probably just embarrass myself. But you know what I mean? This is obviously going to have an impact on the other people in there because they're receiving that external information and acting upon it. But ultimately, what we describe extrinsic feedback as is an environmental experience. You're receiving information from the environment. Now, we want to go a little bit further with this and we want to look at some other examples. So I'm going to introduce you now to what we call knowledge of results. Now, I saw something interesting. Well, I personally find I don't think you're going to find it interesting actually reflecting on that. I've always known knowledge of results as KOR. Okay, K-o-r, and I saw something today which just referred to it as KR. Okay, it wasn't interesting, but I'm going to refer to it as KOR, knowledge of results. Now, what does this mean? Well, this is a series of factual information. Okay, so it's factual information provided to the athlete, and really, what it provides is what was the outcome. What was the outcome? So let's have a look back at our example, see if we can sort of address this idea. And we've got Pau Gasol. And he's taking what appears to be a free throw shot at the basket he's taking a free throw shot. So what would be the knowledge of results there? I guess ultimately the knowledge of results would be, did the ball go in or not? And that would be the feedback that I guess ultimately he's going to judge this performance on. Okay, so it tends to be things like times, distances, how fast did I run, how far did I throw. It could also be things like in or out. I just talked about that with Gasol, for example. And it can also be things like win or lose. These are examples of knowledge of results, and start to notice that these are, generally speaking, all extrinsic types of feedback. And finally, I'm going to come over here. We're going to have a look at the idea of knowledge of performance, or and before today I would have always referred to as KOP. Well, I'm going to still refer to, I'm sticking to my guns, K, little o, big P. I'm going to do that slightly because it looks darn ugly. Goodness gracious. I struggle with K's, if I'm honest. K-O-P. Slightly better, still not pretty. Never mind. So what is knowledge of performance? And we're asking the question here of how well did, so we're saying did or is performance go? How well did performance go? Whoops. Or how well is it going? Okay, so we're looking here at the knowledge of the performance, not the outcome. So very frequently, KOP is what we would call technique-based. Technique-based. And what we mean by that is that we're going to be looking at things like, things such as, was the elbow in the right position on the swimming, on the recovery in the front crawl swimming technique, for example? What was my first serve percentage today? How many unforced errors did I make? And we describe these as performance indicators. Performance indicators, because they are the factors, obviously, that will vary in different sports, different performances, different positions, but those performance indicators suggest whether we've performed well or not. And of course, if we perform well, we're more likely to win. So we're saying it could be something like percentage success rate, something like percentage successful passing rate, successful first serve rate. Let's take something like let's go back to our we could look at the gymnastics example, and we could look at let me change colour. We could look at the degrees of arc in the spine by using video analysis to actually analyse the performance. It's not the result, did she land on the beam, but it's the performance, and that would be after the performance, of course. So it's going to be success rate, but it could also be things such as, if we were doing a 100-metre sprint, what were the split times? And can we improve the start or the pickup or whatever that we might want to work on? So those are 4 types of feedback, and they can be used to improve performance.